Across the headlines here on RT International, Iran and Russia sealing the deal. A 20-year strategic partnership treaty is signed in Moscow by the two nations' leaders. As dozens of key points are established in the face of Western sanctions, the multipolar world is rising.
Double standards have reached the end of their life. The fact that one country has the complete right to kill citizens, to kill children and women, to destroy hospitals and schools, while then asserting its position on human rights and pointing the way for us is unacceptable.
Yeah, Iran's president calling out the double standards of Israel and its allies aiding in the Gaza carnage. In his speech alongside Vladimir Putin, he slammed Israel's trail of bloodshed, highlighting the free pass they get as Palestinians pay with their lives. And right as Joe Biden packs his bags and readies himself for the sunset, the White House announces it's restricting the export of high-tech chips used for artificial intelligence, ultimately kneecapping America's industry and even some U.S. allies. Well, we're already looking at a busy Saturday here on RT International live from Moscow. Our guests are standing by for commentary. So, kicking off the news hour right here on RT and here in Moscow, where a 20-year strategic partnership treaty is inked by the presidents of Russia and Iran. Vladimir Putin highlighted what's in store, not for the immediate weeks or months, but for the decades to come.
We are united in taking our relations to a qualitatively new level. This is the meaning of the signed Interstate Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement. It sets ambitious goals and outlines guidelines for deepening bilateral cooperation in the long term in politics and security, trade, investment, and humanitarian fields. And this truly breakthrough document is aimed at creating the necessary conditions for the stable and sustainable development of Russia and Iran, as well as our entire common Eurasian region. In the first 10 months of last year, the trade turnover increased by 15.5%. It is characteristic that our countries have almost completely switched to national currencies and mutual settlements, are striving to build stable channels of credit and banking interaction, and are working on combining national payment systems.
The importance of this agreement signed in Moscow today between Russia and Iran cannot be underestimated. Vladimir Putin says that despite all the pressure and illegal sanctions from outside, the relationship between Moscow and Tehran is only getting stronger. And this agreement signed in Moscow paves the way and creates the legal foundation for even further growth. Frankly, Iran has been under so many restrictions for so many years, and Russia is under a record amount of sanctions. So it's no wonder why these two have grown to have quite a close relationship. Trade is on the rise. It increased by about 15% in the past 10 months alone. Most of the mutual payments are done in national currencies. The two countries are on the same page when it comes to various international issues like Syria. They agree that it should be up to the Syrian people to decide who will head the country next. They also discussed the conflict in Palestine and agreed that only a two-state solution in order for it to finally be resolved. And of course, security and mutual defense is a vital issue for both countries. And one of the points in that agreement does say that if one of them gets attacked, the other country has no right to provide any assistance to the aggressor. Both Russia and Iran have been stressing, though, that this is not a military alliance and this agreement is not aimed against any other side. Frankly, this agreement has 47 articles, and it's hard to even list all the spheres of cooperation between the two countries, which it looks like are only going to strengthen and increase in the future.
President Pezeshkian's first trip to Moscow already proved to be fruitful, launching a contract that went through 3 different Iranian administrations before finally being signed. Iran regards this agreement as a new chapter in the Iranian-Russian relations, saying that it opens up a wealth of opportunities for both sides in various sectors, including trade, transport, and, of course, security. The pact will facilitate trade agreements that could help both countries neutralize Western sanctions. One of the key aspects of this agreement is to complete the North-South corridor, a transport corridor. It's a massive transit route and a transit project which will connect Iran to Russia and from there to Europe and Asia. The two presidents also discussed international issues, including the Middle East and the Ukraine conflict. Mr. Pezeshkian made it clear that the conflict in Ukraine must be settled and resolved through dialogue, suggesting that if the West stops imposing its will on Ukraine, peace can be achieved.
The major agreement signed today will open a new chapter in our relations, particularly regarding the trade and economic ties between Iran and Russia. We discussed areas of cooperation in the South Caucasus, Syria, the Middle East, and Afghanistan. I believe that the changes occurring in our region, considering the role of new organizations and structures such as BRICS and the SCO, truly present a new opportunity and potential for interaction between the two countries. The introduction of military actions and war does not resolve issues. We welcome a political settlement of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. We must respect each other, and of course, Western countries should not force others to submit to them.
Elsewhere in his remarks, Pezeshkian drew a parallel between what's going on in Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East, saying that it all boils down to the West's double standards. He said that the Western countries like to preach about human rights while simultaneously committing grave violations themselves. He emphasized that this hypocrisy is no longer acceptable as the world has come to realize what's going on following the Gaza war.
Double standards have reached the end of their life. The fact that one country has the complete right to kill citizens, to kill children and women, to destroy hospitals and schools, while then asserting its position on human rights and pointing the way for us is unacceptable. In another country, especially for us, they demand adherence to human rights by their rules. These double standards are intolerable. We want the unipolar world to stop dictating our path. One cannot govern the world with double standards. There are no differences between small and large countries. Everyone is equal.
So Pezeshkian said that the era of unilateralism is gone as multilateral organizations such as BRICS and the SCO are emerging and thriving, he said, and taking a closer look at Iran and Russia's growing alliance. It is a speaking example of this multipolarity. We all know how Russia helped Iran join BRICS and the SCO and also endorsed Iran's membership in the Eurasian Economic Union. The two sides are actually moving on the path towards fulfilling important aspects of this multipolarity as they are beginning to ditch the dollar and trade in their national currencies. And this strategic deal will help to speed up all these visions that are set by the two sides. So with Iran and Russia signing a 20-year strategic partnership agreement, the multipolarity is well underway.
Well, China has launched an investigation into America's high-tech industry, calling out a, quote, unfair competitive advantage. That's after Washington announces restrictions on the export of its chips used for AI development, setting up a three-tiered system that'll divide the world and also set some of America's allies without this AI capacity. It's prompted backlash not only internationally, but also from American corporations as well. And before we join our guests to discuss this story, here's RT's Marina Kozareva.
Another low points for the Biden administration and an erupting volcano for Donald Trump to try and contain when he assumes the presidency. That's the message from average Americans who are dumbfounded at the latest move coming out of Washington.
Industry leaders say the proposed restrictions would hurt innovation and global business.
Export control framework will go down as one of the most destructive to ever hit the U.S. technology industry and, quote, says we don't need a ride. We need government to get out of the way.
This is all going to be managed by a government agency, and I can't think of a worse thing for innovation and speed and revenue than having a traffic cop. I think we're all in on national security, but this is the wrong answer.
These restrictions are nothing new for Russia and China, who have been limited in their ability to access US-made chips for years. But now Joe Biden has taken it to a whole new level, dividing the world into friend and foe. Tier 1 is for countries without restrictions, also known as the Allies. They include Australia, Japan, South Korea, and a bunch of European countries. They are also allowed to install some of their processors in less friendly countries, but no more than 7% for any individual Tier 2 country, like the Czech Republic, Austria, Poland, and Slovakia, who were surprised by Biden's move, to say the least. Tier 2 contains most of the world, encompassing Mexico, Portugal, a NATO member, by the way, as well as countries across the Middle East and Latin America. They would all face caps on their access to U.S. chips. They could apply for so-called validated end-user status to get more computing power, but only if they prove that they comply with U.S. regulations. And finally, we have America's outcasts in Tier 3, which include China, Russia, Belarus, and Iran. They will be completely banned from importing U.S.-made chips.
Today, countries of concern actively employ AI, including US-made AI, in this way and seek to undermine US AI leadership. To enhance US national security and economic strength, it is essential that we do not offshore this critical technology and that the world's AI runs on American rails.
The problem is that industry experts are alarmed that this could throw the U.S. economy off the rails. NVIDIA, which is the key manufacturer of the most advanced chips in the U.S., insists that these restrictions will do very little, if anything at all, to reduce the risk of misuse, but will increase risks for the U.S. itself.
For decades, leadership in computing and software ecosystems has been a cornerstone of American strength and influence worldwide. That global progress is now in jeopardy. The Biden administration now seeks to restrict access to mainstream computing applications with its unprecedented and misguided AI diffusion rule, which threatens to derail innovation and economic growth worldwide. In its last days in office, the Biden administration seeks to undermine America's leadership with a 200-plus page regulatory morass drafted in secret and without proper legislative review.
And they're not alone in that opinion. Those who know how this works and what's at stake are outraged that they weren't even consulted and that Washington would put politics over common sense.
The proposed framework fails to address the core challenge in a targeted way and would have potentially catastrophic consequences for U.S. digital industry leadership. Moreover, the Biden administration developed the proposed rules almost wholly without industry consultation and has ignored far better approaches to address the central challenge.
This is another wake-up call given to Europe. Some European countries can no longer rely on the U.S.
Russia and China are, of course, used to being excluded from the so-called members club, so they're more direct in their criticism.
The U.S. keeps overstretching the concept of national security, politicizing and weaponizing trade and tech issues, and using sanctions as a go-to tool. This seriously violates the legitimate rights and interests of companies from countries around the world, including China. This also jeopardizes market rules and the international trade order, destabilizes global industrial and supply chains, and undermines the common interests of U.S. and other companies globally. What the U.S. does is typical economic coercion and bullying. China deplores it and firmly opposes it.
By creating artificial barriers to the development of technologies and the artificial intelligence industry, the US is striving to consolidate its role as, if not the only one, then the main supplier of technologies and the fruits of their application to all countries in need. Of course, they do this solely on their own terms. And what is the contradiction? The fact is that representatives of the United States of America are very active at relevant international venues, various international venues, where artificial intelligence, new technologies, and achievements are discussed. Well, literally, they always try to be one of the pioneers in discussing and raising some kind of issue. And in the initiatives that they promote and propose, a significant place is given, you will not believe it, to the elimination of the digital divide. They talk all the time about the digital divide, how it needs to be bridged between developing and developed countries. After all, these statements must be confirmed within the framework of a specific policy that the US is pursuing. And there, everything is exactly the opposite, because they regularly introduce non-market barriers to technology transfer and innovation in various ways. Those restrictions, tariffs and obstacles are precisely to ensure that these new technologies, which are the key to reducing the digital divide, do not enter certain regions of the world.
But perhaps the most comical or tragic aspect of it all is that Joe Biden is willing to threaten U.S. economic growth and diplomatic relations for something that looks set to fail and, to boot, might make its adversaries even stronger.
There is a possibility that access to less advanced hardware might just lead to more innovative, higher efficiency solutions, a phenomenon supposedly behind the surprising performance of DeepSeek, a recent Chinese AI challenger to established U.S. giants. In time, such advances could also emerge from tech industries across the global south, especially parts of Southeast Asia and the Middle East.
It seems that Washington refuses to learn from historical mistakes and is once again on the wrong course. Maybe Biden should have used some artificial intelligence to aid him making decisions, because clearly he's lost his mind and ability to steer the nation towards its best interests.
Well, let's take this conversation further now with a panel of guests joining us here live on RT International. On the left screen, we have Atul Tripathi, an AI and quantum computing expert. In the middle screen, Kevin Michalizzi, a former Department of Defense contractor. And on the far right screen, Carl Jar, an RT contributor for us. All of you gentlemen, a very warm welcome. We appreciate you sharing your Saturday with all of us here at the RT International Mothership in Moscow. Atul, first to you, if I may. According to these reports, India is evaluating the damage from U.S. restrictions to the country's AI development, as New Delhi apparently is ending up on tier number 2. Atul, read into this for me. How do you interpret this?
So there are two things, One, I like that phrase, artificial barriers for artificial intelligence. I really love that. That's a wonderful way of putting it up, I would say. And actually, artificial barrier. I mean, I don't know. I am still bemused and I'm confused. What exactly is the US trying to achieve? And as you said, and in your report, you said, they're still not able to figure out. They have not learned from the past. Let's take the two examples, very, very prominent ones: nuclear technology, space technology. They did not learn it. They restricted it. The world did not stop. The world will never stop. It will go ahead. AI is going to be another one. It will not stop. Countries will move ahead. Today, it's tier 2 for India. What are the rules that has been said that you will move from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3? Where is the rule written? Is it at my whims and fancies? No, it should not be. It has to be clearly written. If you have the access to the technology, and please remember, it's very important to remember one important thing, that the technology that US has developed in AI comes from the shoulders and brains of not only the Americans, but also the people who have immigrated to America from various parts of the world, in particular from India. So US must respect that, whether they like it, they don't like it.
It's a very good comment from you, Atul. I appreciate that. Carl, coming over to you. As you well know, countries like China and Russia are completely blocked from American AI chip exports. Beijing is a primary target. Do you think China can get around this? What's the goal?
China has already been blocked. And China, in fact, because China has been blocked, China has trying to develop its own indigenous technology. DeepSeek has been mentioned. China just made DeepSeek available at such cheap price. People can use DeepSeek, parse 6 million tokens for only 50 cents. United States, OpenAI would not be able to compete with that. What US has done is erect a digital Berlin Wall and basically is giving up vast majority of the world market to the Chinese software.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Nice one there, Carl. Kevin, over to you. Washington is naming 18 of its closest allies free of restrictions with these chips, but there's still NATO and EU members coming under these chip export limits. Is that by design or is that just a mistake? Your thoughts, Kevin?
I think it is another situation where the Biden administration is trying to make it difficult for the incoming administration to operate. We've seen the same thing when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, and we know that they can't stop China from moving forward. They're the number 2 guys in AI development. They control a lot of the raw materials needed, even for the United States to make chips. So considering Trump is a businessman, and he will look at the fact that this will harm allies' economies, and one of his advisors is Elon Musk, who is not for open AI, but he's a technology guy. So he has the brains to look at this and say, this isn't good for our country.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, Kevin. Atul, back over to you. The American stated goal is to make sure that the world's AI would, quote, run on American rails. So what implications does a monopoly have for tech development, Atul?
So let me put it this way. As Kevin said, that the fact that Chinese are trying to build their own ecosystem, which is very natural to do, one. Two, on the similar lines, India is trying to do it. We are not going to be stopping it under any given circumstances. As far as, making sure that the entire ecosystem runs on the American rail systems or ecosystem of AI, well, it is not going to happen. It will never happen because technology will move ahead. In fact, I'll just like to quote the gentleman who just moved into the new CIA as a CIA head nominee. He says, quantum AI will define the future of national security, geopolitical power, and human civilization.
Yeah.
So they are already scared about the fact that there are competing countries. And Americans know it very well that, the lot of brains that is going there to develop these technologies are coming from Asian countries, whether it is India or China, the mathematics and the computer sciences behind it.
Yeah,
so they are also scared, so they cannot run it entirely on their ecosystems and their rails, as they say.
Yeah, it's a good point there. Carl, back over to you. U.S. industrial organizations arguing that the move may open the way for competitors to fill the void left by American export restrictions. That could potentially be damaging to any number of U.S. companies, perhaps? Is it a case of, well, I don't know, is it a mistake? Carl, over to you, your thoughts?
Well, before the U.S. chip ban on China, China is the largest export market for the American company NVIDIA. So NVIDIA has effectively been cut off on its largest market by a mere decree of the U.S. government. Now, China is very busy creating its domestic alternatives. The Chinese companies, they have no choice. They have no choice but to go domestic. We saw the very fast pace at which they're catching up. Just in November, we have ex-Google CEO Eric Schmidt admitting that China may only be a few months behind in terms of AI development, despite the American attempt to slow down China's tech progress. I don't think they're even a couple months behind right now. DeepSeek has made the large language model so inexpensive. The prices have dropped 97%.
Wow. Yeah, that really is something, isn't it, Carl? Kevin, let's get your thoughts on this. The U.S. business community is questioning whether this move would actually be of any help to U.S. national security, despite this being named as the motivation for restrictions by the White House. Why do these companies view it differently, Kevin?
Well, because they have a view into who their customers are. They are the largest exporter of AI chips to China, so it will harm their bottom line. If they can't sell chips, then where are they going to get the money to stay in business and put into the development of new technology?
Yeah.
So it's all intertwined AI across the global economy. And the United States is not viewing this as a global economy anymore. They're just looking at it from a selfish standpoint.
Yeah, you got to wonder, is the U.S. trying to corner the market in this field right here? Atul, over to you. Are we facing the risk of, I don't know, the world becoming divided when it comes to just simple access to artificial intelligence? I mean, do you think this should be open for all?
Yes, the world will be divided. Again, as I said in my initial talk, the fact of the matter is that you cannot stop the movement of technology. They did it with the nuclear technology. They did it with the space technology. Did the world stop? No, it didn't. Indians went on to develop their own space technology. And look at the funny part of the game. Now we are beating them in their game. Our launch to the Mars, which is called as Mangalyaan, was cheaper than one of the Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the American companies will be the loser in this entire game, and they have a right to be concerned as far as the risk of being, divided between haves and have-nots. Trust me, the gap cannot be left void, and will never be left void.
Yeah,
it's a very natural way. Wherever there's vacuum, air moves in. That's a very natural way. Wherever there's going to be demand, supply will move in, come what may.
Yeah.
There's no risk out there.
Yeah, well said, Atul. Carl, we're going to come back to you. You think the country is targeted by U.S. restrictions on these AI chips and the material, the elements? You think the country's targeted can retaliate or get out of the way?
Well, they don't even need to retaliate. U.S. government basically handed those countries on a platter to its competitors. Huawei, one of the most sanctioned Chinese companies, they have produced a Ascent chip, which has been evaluated as good, if not better, than NVIDIA's AI chips. And Huawei will be able to flood these markets with their own chips. And where does that leave American companies like NVIDIA? There will be less money for the American companies now in terms of revenue and in terms of money they can then pour back into research and development.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading recently, some of the rare earth minerals that America needs for its chips. A lot of these rare earth minerals come from China. So when America starts sanctioning China, China's like, well, okay, well done, mate, but we're not going to send you the rare earth minerals you need for your own chips. So it's just a bit mental these days. I mean, honestly, Kevin, we'll come to you. This is all happening, days before the Trump administration resumes its position in the White House. Kevin, do you see anything on the timing front?
Yes. Being as they made this proposal 7 days before the administration leaves, this is why I think it is nothing but trying to make it more difficult for the Trump administration coming in. So they put something up in the name of national security. So Donald Trump has to say, well, do I go ahead with this to look good, or do I look like the guy who doesn't care about national security?
Yeah.
We all know that sanctions are great for the countries that the United States applies them towards. We develop the technologies to get around it, and things still get traded on the black market. So it isn't anything but a political move. So it comes down to, will Trump and his administration actually approve this or not?
Yeah, fair play there. Atul, let's come back to you for a second here. We know America, and God bless America for all of its wonderful things, but it is the king of sanctions around the world. Who's the king of these AI chips? Can you clear that up for me?
So now, okay, there's going to be no kings and there'll be no queens by any stretch of imagination. Again, let me be very frank with you. They're very good on the chessboards now, and they look very good out there when we use our brains. As far as the kings are concerned, right now, yes, I would say America is the leader. But then China and India, they're not going to be stopping. And so will not be the Russians. Nobody's going to stop. They need their resources, they need to develop, and they will develop. And trust me, things are happening very silently at a very calm pace, which is not being, a lot of noise is not being made. However, the market trends are indicators where the Indians have started to move in this semiconductor business at all completely with the tie-up of some of the companies, and also at the individual levels. So there is a lot of movement happening, and there's going to be no kings and no queens. I may feel at this time period I'm the ruler of the world, but sorry, I'm not the ruler of the world by any stretch.
Well, I appreciate that, Atul. Thanks for clearing that up for us. Kevin, closing statement, if I may. Carl, please stand by. But Kevin, America, these AI chips, is it more for a military capacity or is it more for computing?
I think in trying to hold it close, they will start using it for military capacity. We can see where Israel has started using AI in the military capacity, and I think the United States will do this as well. You know, they're behind the curve on a lot of things militarily. So, yeah, I think this is where ultimately they would want it to go. That's a typical Democratic Party thing at this point.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair play. Kevin Michelizzi is a former Department of Defense contractor on the middle screen. On the right is Carl Jar, RT contributor. And on the far left is Atul Tripathi, an AI and quantum computing expert. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for your time as well as we come to you live from Moscow. This is the RT International Mothership. We are back soon.